Yeah, so that's another model. So how many models do we have so far? And here's the thing, they're all true. The Earth does go around the sun. That's not wrong, right? We've got lots of reasons for believing that. Not only because you've taught that model to your kid when you took them to the science fair, right? And you built I did one of that. You know, we had beautiful paper mache, you know, sun in the center and all the planets, you know, and everything, trying to get it to school without everything all breaking, you know, and putting it together. And then the next year, or a couple of years later, I did one for my daughter, and we couldn't do the same thing, so we had to do the moon instead, which was But, so we've got the Earth-centered model, you've got the sun-centered model. By the way, there's also another one called the vacuum-centric model, because the sun is being pulled by the other planets, especially the bigger ones. And so, strictly speaking, the hypothetical middle of the system is empty space, because the sun is being pulled around too, right? So that's another model, right? Einstein's model, you're the center of the universe, and if you're the center of the universe, then the Earth is the center, right? Because you're on it, right? By the way, anybody figure out how that gravity situation works for Einstein? Everyone still believes in gravity, yes? This is fun, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Gravity is a perfectly good concept, and it's true within a particular context, right? But for Einstein, the reason that you're staying in the chair while we're on an orb that's moving through space, although everything's moving in a straight line, it's slightly curved. Space is curved, right? And so the thing is that while you're traveling and the Earth is traveling, you're on an angle to the Earth, and so that you're basically crashing into the Earth at exactly the amount that keeps you staying in your chair. Because you're moving, the Earth is, do you see how that works? Everything's moving, we're all moving, right? So it's not like the Earth is sucking you down. Instead,
are you talking about the centrifugal force of the Earth spinning counteracting it?
Well, it's all traveling in a straight line through space, except that as it's traveling, you're traveling, and because space is curved, you're curved towards the Earth in your motion.
Okay.
Right? Newton came up with the idea of everything has gravity, and so everything is attracted to one another. They came up, of course, eventually with the problems. Well, what if the sun blew up instantly? Does everything get flung off into space? No. How long before it would affect us? It's all sorts of interesting questions. And Einstein's theory gives us the idea of what's relativity. Everything is moving, but it's traveling in a straight line. But space itself is curved. And the weight of things, the mass of things, curves space around it. So space is curved around you as well. It's also curved around the Earth. It's also curved around the sun. And so the things in space are moving in a straight line in curved space. In any case, that's just fun.
I haven't gotten around to taking physics yet. It's on my to-do list.
When I took physics, that wasn't the physics that anyone taught. However, so what am I suggesting here? And it's not just theory of relativity concerning physics. It's concerning the nature of truth, context, right? So what we're looking at are all these different models, and I think that one of the best contemporary examples of this modeling is thanks to Stephen Hawking. this is in his latest, well, he's dead now, sorry about that, but The Grand Design that he wrote with Mladenov. And so it's called model-dependent realism. So these different things are real. So first we have to have the model, and the model has to work. So remember the big significant discovery of Galileo's discovering Venus going around the sun and not around the Earth. That meant that the model before, the Ptolemaic model, was wrong. Right? See, there are true and false, right? So you have to correct your model when you realize that you've got something wrong. But the Tychonic model adequately corrects that. Right? So you can still have an Earth-centered model, which basically, if you think about it, it's just the mirror image of the heliocentric model, right? Right. So if the one, and I think I said this, right? If the one model works, the other model has to work too. They both have to be true in order for either one of them to be true, right? And that hurts our head, right? Because I think we grow up feeling like, well, one or the other has to be true. Well, and here's what we're trying to get across, and this is really significant. I think the main reason why higher education is good for people, right, is that we get a hold of this and understand it, and that is that human beings create these models that are based on our language, the categories that we call our words and phrases and so on, right? And these models give us a working view of how the universe works, right? And as practical as that is for you, that's certainly true for you, right? It works. We correct them as we go. As we have more experiences, we correct them, right? But those are models in our heads that we use in order to understand what's going on around us and predict what's going to happen next, right? So I learned that if I go out in the rain without a jacket, I'm going to get cold by the time I get wherever I'm going. So the next time when I see it raining, I wear a jacket and maybe bring an umbrella or something, right? So I learned from my experience. Cold rain will make me feel cold, so I will do something to prevent that from happening, right? Just one little example, right? So these models work for us. Some models are better than others, and we have to try to improve our models, which is science, right? God bless you.
Bless you.
We still say God bless you, even though just because you sneeze, we no longer believe that that means that the Spirit of God has left you momentarily and there's a vacuum there that the devil might sneak in and harm you, right? So we bless you right away so that God gets back in there before the devil does, right? We still say that, but we don't really believe all of that, right? We've corrected our model, but there's certain elements of politeness that we still, we still call alcohol spirits. Let's not get into that, right? So, don't mistake reality for the models. We can have multiple models. In fact, when we have what's called a revolution, so to speak, a revolution in ideas, like Einstein compared to Newton, and Galileo compared to Ptolemy, and so on. Right? Aristotle, really. Right? We think of these as scientific revolutions, right? And we call them paradigm shifts, where we've shifted from one paradigm to another, right? And each of these paradigms, that's just a fancy highfalutin word for a model, right? So we have all these different paradigms. The old paradigm still works. We still use Newton for all of the things that, like building a building. We don't use hyperbolic geometry to design a building because we would never be finished with the plans. It's too complex. You can't draw a straight line because space is curved, right? And engineers need straight lines. They want straight lines, right? So model-dependent realism. So within each model there is truth. So it doesn't mean that there's no truth, but as Einstein points out, the relativity comes in when you go from one particular context to another. You have to understand which context you're in, right? And that's why, of course, the same thing applies then to when we're talking about true statements in other contexts. Did Trump lie? For example, right? And you look, we've got what, 40% of the voters say absolutely not, I love my president, and the other people will say, what the heck are we doing with this guy there, right? Right? Well, can they both be right? Theoretically, yes. Because they're both looking at it from a different context. So if you understood the context, you would see why these people think this, these people think this, these people don't even know what's going on. Because they're not in the context, right? Question?
I feel like a friggin' idiot because I have no idea what you're saying. But that's okay, I'll keep coming back. I didn't take any of these science classes. Anyway, my question is this. So am I understanding that you're saying like all these different models would be like different people witnessing a car accident?
Yes.
And everybody's looking
That's
at
a
it from a
perfect
different
example.
angle?
Yep. Yep.
So they're only seeing that one view, so that's their perception of reality, that's their truth, and there's all these little truths happening all at the same time?
Mhm.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Sort of?
Although,
Am I close?
remember, everything gets more complex because
Except for my cooking.
I personally love it when I eat a meal that has ingredients. I like it when it has ingredients.
I don't know what that means.
Ingredients?
Is that like don't microwave, or if you can microwave it, it still has ingredients? Because you had to
I
put
think
something
every
in.
meal has to have it. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, well, okay, then perfect. I can microwave one hell of a pot pie.
Yes. Yeah, ingredients. That should be true for every meal. Because if you're not eating something that has ingredients, then there's nothing there, right?
Yes. So am I
that
on the
could have
right
been
track
funny.
about the perception thing then?
You're
Ish.
right, yes. The thing is, say we had a car crash on 5th and some street downtown, and there were 5 people right there in that particular perimeter that saw the accident, and they each saw it from a different perspective, and it would probably be pretty close. They would probably say, yes, she ran the red light, and that person, hit them, right? So it was that person's fault. Probably would be agreement on that, right? But all 5 of them, okay, well, maybe not. I'm not, and I didn't mean she in your sense.
No.
I don't know if
Keep
you've
going.
ever been in an accident. I wasn't there, but but the thing is, in that particular situation, you're dealing with people that are all within a culture, that are all seeing things from a particular, relatively speaking, same point of view, right? But what we're looking at here are even cultural differences. Where, I don't understand why that person thinks that way. Having sex with children is perfectly acceptable. And I'm like horrified, because to me that's like just absolutely unforgivable. But there are cultures that feel like, hey, that's perfectly fine. Why would that? And I believe you can actually travel to those places, and you can pay your money, and you can have your child for the night. It's not my fault, and I'm kicking, well, I can't really kick myself. But, you know, that's a terrible example, but there are some cultural, you know, things that you feel like are just absolutely horrible. I have another perfect example, of course, is the argument over abortion. Right? There are folks that feel that's absolutely murder, right? Then there are folks that feel like, hey, the fetus is not viable until he gets his medical degree. Sorry, that's a Jewish joke, but you know, that's, no, I shouldn't have said that either, but, oh.
You're digging yourself a hole here.
Sorry.
So then, my question would be, you were saying something about like truth is, there's different versions of the truth, so if 5 people saw the accident, what about the camera that videotaped it?
That's another point of view. Plus, and that
Wouldn't
doesn't
that-
actually get out of it, because when we look at the camera view, we're going to interpret that. And the camera view is also limited. It's not seeing it from the driver's point of view or whatever, right? So we could actually, I mean, we have lots of YouTube videos of, you know, a policeman shooting somebody. And everybody all upset because we see how it looked from the camera's point of view, right? But what about from the policeman's point of view? What about from other, I mean, there are other points of view. So the camera doesn't solve it. That just adds dimensions. It gets more complex. Because now we have the camera, right?
Well, you also miss the perception of the heat of the moment too. If somebody's driving by and a backfire happens, you know, you might jump out of your skin. If you're watching that on a video, you're sitting there going, what, this is just a YouTube video. I don't care. So there's a lot of perception that you would see in the moment that you probably wouldn't see in a video, that you wouldn't be exposed to. Unless you had Dolby surround sound and it was bumped up really high and everything was to be clarity.
But I'm focusing on this because this is part of the really big picture, right? That human knowledge is limited to the systems we create and what we experience within those systems, right? So in a sense, as we explore and grow new complex ways of viewing things, our knowledge grows. Each time we add another complex system of interpretation, we now have a new tool that we can use in that specific context that we didn't have before, right? So as we invent new things and we have new technologies, we can do things that they couldn't do before we had these technologies. They add things. Football games. You know, when you watch a football game, it used to be that the refs had to make the call. You know, the line, the ref, whatever they call it. The ones out there right by the tackle or something, right? Had to determine whether the catch was made before the tackle, right? Well, but now we've got cameras from all different angles, and so all the refs come out and they look at the videos, and they can see whether the ball actually touched the ground or not, and so they correct the ref on the spot. Wow, that never used to happen before. And yet Super Bowls will be decided based on a couple of calls like that, right? Amazing, right? But, so what do you think? Is it fairer that way? And now we can see the camera and you can see whether the ball touched the ground, if you trapped it. You know what football is, right? No. Okay, let me move on, because I'm probably, okay, so,
I have a quick question.
yes.
Is this our actual test, or are we testing out
Test
the-
1.
This is test 1.
Right.
Okay, I was confused because it said chapters 1 through 4, and so I wasn't sure if you were testing out of the book itself.
In my mind, I am testing out of the context of the book.
Okay.
That these are the kinds of things that when we're talking about language matters, I'm not just going through the book. I'm trying to give you my overall impression of what this is concerning.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure there weren't any questions in the book that we were supposed to be answering. The book
Well,
itself.
the second test, yes. You'll have, actually, I'll just give them to you in class.
Okay.
You'll be, don't worry about it.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was answering the right thing.
You should love this class and relax, because it's Logic 101. This is like the easiest course in our curriculum. But it's important, right? If that makes sense.
I had a logic class that was actually pretty difficult.
Logic class?
Yeah, like a pretty high percentage of people didn't pass, but he was a lot.
Everyone that shows up and sends me their essays will pass this course.
Glad to hear it.
That's my promise on how I grade things. And remember, there's a deal here. I want you to like me. Right? Could I make logic harder? Absolutely. No problem. But no, I don't want to do that because I want to keep my job. Right? But yeah, be aware that logic could be much more difficult, and there's way more involved. I mean, so I don't want you to feel like you're being cheated out of a difficult course just because I want to keep my job, so my wife gets paid some money, you know. But as I was sitting on the deck in the sunshine with a good book I was reading, eating, and all that sort of stuff, it was like, this is heaven, right here in Eagle River, you know, and I want to keep it that way, you know. So, and I've figured out, hey, I want to get students so that I can have a class. I need them to like me, and if you fail half the class, those people will not like you, and they will tell people, don't take Jamison. For one thing, you'll never understand what the heck he's talking about. Talking about something like football, which nobody understands. Okay, so this is the first test, and everyone gets all of the questions right as long as you send me 300 words for each question, right?
300 words for each question.
Yeah, isn't that what I say? 300 words each. English word. I have problems with English because it's not a language. How many of you have tried learning English?
I mean, I guess we all had to at one point.
Probably as a kid. But the problem is, I mean, you can get gung-ho over English if you like, but gung-ho isn't an English word. And English is not really a coherent language. It's a hodgepodge.
What's the joke they have? English is 5 languages in a trench coat pretending to be one. I think
That's a great one. Yeah, send me that one. I don't have that one in my collection. But yeah, it's a hodgepodge of all these different language roots, right? And by the way, hodgepodge is Hungarian. Haji-paji. It's also a mishmash of all these different language roots, right? Mishmash is Yiddish.
I had a feeling so.
Pardon?
I said I had a feeling so. As soon as you said that.
There are words that are supposed to be English words that didn't come from French or German or Latin or Greek. What were the 5 that you heard?
Oh, it wasn't specific. That was a Facebook meme about English. It didn't specify, but I would guess
But
Germanic.
that's the trouble. That's why English poetry is usually so awful. Because, I mean, when you listen to French poetry, everything is kind of, like a melody. Right? Same thing with German, believe it or not, right? I love this. This is absolutely terrific.
We did decide that the music had logic to it. Does poetry, most poetry?
Free form poetry, maybe not.
Some people love poetry, I don't get it.
So,
Good grammar and spelling are important, but if you want to write essays that inspire, messages that forge
This is
brighter
fun.
connections,